Okay, welcome to session number 4. Last time we discussed control structures in Python. Under that, we discussed how selections and repetition is implemented in Python, right? So let's review what we have discussed last time. So the first thing we discussed under the topic is another data type in Python, which we call Boolean type. Especially when we have when you want to represent two different values like true and false, we can use Boolean type in Python. So this is useful whenever you want to make a decision. We can have comparisons, for example, and then we can check whether the outcome is true or false. And make a note that in Python, the values true and false, the first character should be a capital letter. Right, then we discuss what expression usually we will get true or false. These types of expressions we call Boolean expression. So these three Boolean expressions gives you output as a Boolean value. Then we discuss another set of operators which usually use for this, making conditions, which we call comparison operators. So we discuss different symbols we use in comparison operators. Then we also discuss how to combine these different, operations together using what we call logical operations. We discuss three different logical operations, which is AND operation. We'll check whether both expressions evaluate true. Operation whether one of them evaluate true, and not operation, which is the complement. Right. Now, when it comes to implementation details, we discuss for selection, we can use if, elif, else, and end. And then for repetition, we were discussing while and for loops. So we started looking at the if statement. Usually when you want to make a decision based on a particular condition, so you can take different paths. Now, in this first example, we look at when you take a number, if the number is negative, we make it a positive so that we can get the absolute value of the number. So when you want to implement this in Python program, we can make use of if statement. So you can see in the first line, we get a integer value, and we check whether it's a negative number. If that is the case, we multiply by -1. So whenever the number is negative, only then this statement is executed. And if the number is positive, nothing will happen, and you will get the absolute value of the number. Then one point we discuss very important in Python, especially there's no end if you look at this, and if you're familiar with any other programming language. So only way to indicate the block of statement, which is like what is inside the if, is this indentation, the space in front of this. So the usual number of spaces is 4 spaces. So if you adhere to that, if all the statements are inside, we have to have the same spacing. We call indentation. Very important. And if you miss it, you will get indentation error. Right. The second example we look at when you have a condition, and depend on the outcome, you are going to take two different paths. So in this example, we got marks of the subject. If the marks is greater than or equal to 50, we say pass. Otherwise, we would say fail. Right. Now, in the implementation, we get the marks as an integer value. You can see here the first statement. And if marks is greater than or equal to 50, that means if this condition is true, then we are going to say print pass. And else statement is used to have the other when the condition fails, what should happen? In this particular case, it should print fail. Right. Then we discuss what about like nested ifs, that means nested selection. So you can see here we have we are getting a temperature value, or temperature of water states. We take the temperature, depend on the temperature, we are going to identify three different states as ice, water, and steam. Now here, for a particular given condition, we have only two outcomes. So therefore, in first instance, we check whether the value is negative, which means the water in ice state. If that is not the case, we know that there could be two more states. It could be water, it could be steam, which means we have to have another selection. So this time we ask a question of whether the temperature is less than or equal to 100. If it is true, we know that it should be water because the temperature is equal to 0 or more, and temperature is less than or equal to 100. So we print water. If both incorrect, which means it's actually greater than 100, so which we can print as stream. So when it comes to implementation, you can see we can get the temperature value, we convert into int value, and we get the temperature. If it is less than 0, we say print ice. Otherwise, that means else part, you will have another. So in that, if we are checking whether the temperature is less than or equal to 100, if that is the case, you print water. Otherwise, you are going to print steam. So that is how we can represent nested ifs. But if you want to have compact representation, you can even combine this else and if together. So the next step we discuss is combining this. So you will get more compact code, and notice the indentation, it will be the same. So you will get the same outcome, but you have a more compact code. If you use, when you have a nested if statements, we can easily change it to if and elif statement in Python. Right. And after discussing the selection, we move ahead to discuss about the loops. And the first statement we discuss a while loop. And if you look at with the flow chart, the idea is you have a condition. And if condition is true, you are going to repeat. So this repetition will exist until this becomes false, right? Whenever this becomes false, you are going to come out from the loop. So in the implementation, so we will have while statement and the condition, and whatever the conditions that you want to execute within the loop, you will put inside this while. So indentation you can see. So we have two statements inside the while loop, print number, and you increase number by 1. And we discuss like couple of ideas, like how do you print odd numbers, even how do you print numbers from 10 to 1. So those things we discuss as examples. Right. And then we switched our discussion to final part, which is a for loop. Now, while loop, you can use when you don't know how many times you are going to repeat. So because until the condition become false, it will repeat. So which means if you don't know how many times you are going to repeat in the beginning, we prefer while statement. But if you are going to have it for exactly some number of times, right, then we can go for easily for in statement. So generally, this can iterate over sequence of object, which we will see in coming sessions. For loop is extensively used. Right, now first thing that you need to learn is a range function. And I told you range can take 1 argument, 2 arguments, or 3 arguments. If it takes 2 arguments, it specifies start and end. So what range 1, 5 represent is it start with 1 and it goes on as 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5, not including 5. So you exclude 5 here. If you have just 1, which indicates that only the stop value, that means it should always start with 0. So you will have 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 4. But if you have 3 values, then you have a start, stop, and step. So you start with 1, step is 2, that means after 1, you have to add 2, that you will get 3. Then if you try to add 2, it becomes 5, but you know the value should be less than 5. So in this one, we will get 1 and 3. Right. And we discuss the implementation. For example, if you want to print numbers from 1 to 10, we can say you should start with 1, goes up to 11, which print numbers from 1 to 10. Right. Now let's continue. So as a summary of what we have done from the last time, make a note of that. If when you know how many times you need to repeat, go for statement. But if you do not know how many times you're going to repeat, go for while statement. So that's what we usually recommend. Now I'm going to switch my discussion on jump statement. Now these statements used actually going from one place to another place. Now if you learn like assembly programming language, for example, is all these within the memory, we usually use jump statement for creating selections and repetitions. But here we will see how we can use jump statement to change the program execution. So in Python, there are three jump statements: break, continue, and return. I will discuss return in the next session with functions, but let's discuss break and continue. Right. Now let's start with the break statement. Right. Let me first briefly explain, and we have a simple code. We'll try to understand what happens there. So whenever Python interpreter meets the break statement, and it'll break a loop and you come out from the loop. So for example, in this for loop, it goes from I in range in. So n should specify, let's say somebody enter 10, then it should go from I in range 10, okay? So which means we repeat this 10 times. So in this particular example, it will repeat n times. If somebody enter 1, it will repeat 1 time, 2, 2 times, 3, 3 times, and so on. But what happens here, whenever it means break, then you will come out. So what it says, if I value is greater than 9, whenever whatever the I value, if it is greater than 9, then you should come out, right? So irrespective of whatever the value is in, if I goes, I is greater than 9, it should break. Now think about what will happen. If you have value less than, let's say 10, it will print everything. Nothing will happen. But if you have more than 10, then definitely stop at 10. Okay, I think we should look at with an exam, execution. So let's work together on this one. Right, now what we are going to do, right? Now we are going to, right. So I will take, right. Now first let's take in and let's try to print in. So we know something like this. If you say for I in range 10, what will happen? And if you say print I, right? So okay, so this should be I. There's a mistake in the program. So this should be I. Make a note of this. This should change it to I. So let me run first. So what happens when you run? We know that since we have one argument, we should start with 0, and then 1, 2, 3, it should go up to 9, right? So loop will repeat exactly 10 times. And every time it will run, it should print it. So you can see here, I range 10, meaning starting value is 0. So I becomes 0, it will print 0. Then I becomes 1, it will print 1, 2, 3, goes up to, let's say, 9, you print. Whenever I is 10, you come out. So you can see here, it will print numbers from 0 to 9. Now, what we do here, we will actually get a number n. So what happens now? We are going to get a number n. Let's say int input input a number. So what happens here? And you put n here. So depend on what you enters, it will print. So now let's see. Let me put 10. Then we'll get the same outcome as earlier. It will print from 0 to 9. We put 10. But this time, a user allowed to enter anything. I can put 5, which prints numbers from 0 to 4. I can, put 25, right? So it will print from 0 to 24. Okay, let's type up to this point. Now let's see what will happen if you put a break here. Now, if I put a break here, now without executing this, can a volunteer tell me what is the outcome? Yes, Anuttara said it will display only 0. Great. Because what happens, right? What happens, you start with 0, right? The starting value will be 0. And you print 0. And as soon as you print 0, we have a break statement. We should come out from the loop. Okay? So now I'm going to make a change. I'm going to have if statement. If I is greater than, let's say, 9, I'm going to say break. Now see what will happen. I'm going to run this. If you put form, no change, because it will print as it is, even without a break statement, because the value will not exceed 9. Let's put 10. Again, it will go from 0 to 9, right? When you check print 9, 9 greater than 9, no. Then when you have a 10, right, this goes up to 9, right? You check whether 9 is greater than 9. So you come up with a break statement and you stop at that point. So let me run. Let me put 25. So even if you put 25, so now it should stop from 10, because whenever 9, you stop at that point. 9 is not greater than 9. But when you say 10, 10 greater than 9, so you will break. So if you put a value in more than 11, so always it stop when value is 10. Right. You can check this with different values, and then we'll discuss the next example. Now that we have discussed about the break statement, whenever Python meets a break statement inside the loop, it will break the loop. That's why it's called break, and come out from the loop. Right. Next one, continue statement. Now, continue statement works like this. Whenever Python meets a continue statement, let's say within the inside the loop, it will not execute after the statement, any statement after this. That means in this particular example, calculating the total value, and then it will go to the next iteration. So let's assume that the I is 1, right? And then you print 1, right? And what this statement means, you divide 1 by 2 and you check the remainder. We know when we divide 1 by 2, remainder is 1. So this is not true. So nothing will happen here. So you add that number 1 to the total. Next time, I is 2, right? You divide 2 by 2, the remainder is 0, yes. Then you mean the continue statement. Whenever you mean the continue statement, you will not go to the next statement. It goes to the next iteration. So since I is 2, then you should start with 3. Then you print 3, and you divide by 2, whether you check 0, no, then you will add 3 to the total. So you can see, you add 1, you can 3, you can 5, likewise it will add. Right. First of all, try this, and when you execute so let's discuss this. First of all, we are going to talk about continuous statement. Right? Continuous statement. So when we talk about the continuous statement, first thing is we are printing numbers from 1 to 10, right? Well, at least we have a for loop going from start value 1, end value is 11. That means it should print 1 to 10, right? Without any other, let's try with that. So I can say, okay, for I in range 1, 11, right? And when you say print I, and if you run this, you will see what will happen. Because I is 1, you print 1, I is 2, you print 2, I is 3, you print 3, and so on. Right. The next thing is getting the total. Now here we have a variable total, and what happens with total is you calculate the total value. You are trying to add, when you say total equal total plus I, you are trying to add one number at a time to the total. So first iteration, you add 1. Second iteration, you add 2. Third iteration, you add 3. So basically, without these two statements, we can say that this will calculate the total value from numbers 1 to 10. So let's check this. So now I'm going to say, I have to have a variable, right? You can see here. variable is total. And initially we set total values to 0. So we will say total is 0. Total is 0. And after printing that, what we do, total equals total plus total equal total plus we say I. So you don't see anything, but we actually add numbers starting from 1 to 10, right? So it will only print numbers from 1 to 10 because we have to print total at the end. So just to print the final answer, we can say, okay, print the total. So remember that this time you come out from the loop because indentation is parallel with this. So within the for loop, you have print and total statement. So when you run again this time, you can check, right? It will add all the numbers from 1 to 10. If you add all the numbers from 1 to 10, you will get 55. Right. Now, in this particular case, now what happens in the continuous statement? Now we are going to have if statement within this. And what happens here? Right? Within this, we are going to say if we say I, we will check whether it's divisible by 2. So how do you do that? You will check the mod operator. So if you divisible, so this means the mod operator. If it is equal to 0, then we'll say continue. Right? Now what happens here? Let's try to understand. Now we are going to say that, okay, whenever the variable I, if it is divisible by 2, that means you divide by 2, if the remainder is 0, then you say continue. Whenever you say continue, it won't come to this line. It will go to the next iteration. So now let's see, if the I is 1, you print 1, and then you add 1 to total because this is not true. But whenever I is 2, you print 2, and this is true, you say continue, then you go to the next value, that is 3. So remember that the 2 is not added to the total. 3, you will add to the total. So you can see now it will add only the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, and so on. So when you run this, actually what happened, you calculate the total of odd numbers here. Just check 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So 1, 3, that is 4, 5, 9. 7, 16, 9, 25. So that's how we are getting this. Right. Check this and try to understand. And when you finish, please let me know. Right. So just to summarize what we have discussed so far. So break statement inside the loop, it will come out from the loop, right? So this is very useful, especially when you have iterative statements, and whenever when you want to come out from the loop, you can use a break statement. On the other hand, continue statement, whatever the lines after continue will not continue here, right? It will go to the next iteration. So quite useful when you're writing programs. Okay, so let's move to the next topic for today. I want to discuss how to write our own functions in Python. Now, so far we discussed several functions, the print function, help function, type function, and so on. Sometimes we have to write our own set of functions, right? And functions are reusable modules where like block of codes. So once you write it, you can make use of it, right? So let's see how we can define functions in Python. Now, when you want to define a function, usually in Python, we start with the def keyword. And we have to have some name. We have to define some name for the function. And we should not, use any of the built-in file names. And any parameters. So within the function, if you, let's say, you want to do some calculations and the values that you need, you will get it as parameters. For example, if you are adding two numbers, the parameters would be the two numbers. Right. Okay, so let's look at a small example. I'm going to get a new code window. I'm going to say, okay. Let's say add 2,3. And if you try to run this, now Python will complain because there's no function called add function, right? So you have to first define it. We call user-defined functions. So let's create a function called add function. This is how we will start. So we'll say def, that is the starting keyword, add, and then whatever the variable, let me say number 1 and number 2. So we need like two numbers to work with the function. And what we should do is within the function, let's say we are adding, let's add the number 1 and number 2 and just print it. So if you run it, right, nothing will be displayed, but you have already created a function called add function. Now you can make use of the function. You can say add 2,3. And then it says 5, right? Should say, because yes, it should say 5. So let's put 2030. It'll be 50, right? So now you can see once you write the out structure, then you can make use of this, right? Yes, you can write, and when you finish, just let me know. Right. Now, what we discussed so far is whenever you want to create a function, we can simply define the function with the function name with the required number of parameters. And then once you do that, you can call this. Now, once you create the function, you can call using any number of values. So these are called arguments. So first one, we put 2 and 3 is as arguments. So you will get 5. And if you put 10 and 30, you will get 40. Right. Now that you have learned like, how to create functions in Python, The next thing that I would like to discuss is about the variables, especially we call variable scope. Now, without typing this code, I want you to work on this problem. So you can find there's a variable A. Initially, we set it to 0. And there's a function called change A, and there's no parameters inside, but within the function, you change A to 1, right? My first question is, when you say print A, what is the value? Then you call the change A function, and then again you print A. So you see this print A statement repeat twice, one before calling the function and one after calling the function. My question is, what is the output without running this? Can you guess? I want everybody to guess just to understand whether you understood this problem. So obviously there should be two values, right? Because there are two print statements. So you can comma separate. You can say 1, 1, you can say 0, 0, either 0, 1 or 1, 0. What is the outcome? Everybody should try this. Okay, those who have provided me the answer, you can now type the code, run, and observe the answer. And you can check whether you get the correct answer. This is a simple one, isn't it? Now you can see there's a variable A, initially it's 0. And there's a function we have defined. We call it change A, but we are not taking any values. But within the function, we set A to 1, right? Now what we do, we try to print A, then we call the function. We try to call the function again. Try to print the number again, print A again. Those who have finished, what is the correct answer? Yes. Now let me explain. Now when you run this, you will get 0 and 0, right? Isn't it? Let me check. Right. Now let me type my case as well. So I'm going to get the code, right? I'm going to say A equals 0, and I'm going to say def change A, and I will say A equals 1. Now what I do, I will print A, then I will call the function change A, and I will say print A again. So if you run it, right, it's 0, 0. Right. Now, the reason for this is whatever the variable we define within the function, make a note of this, very important. Whatever the variables we define within the function, will not be visible to the outside. Although we have the same variable name here and we set it to 1, it will not visible to the outside. We call this variable, whatever the variables within the function, they are called local variables. When we say local variables will not visible to the outside. So although you say a is 0, that a and the a we have defined within the function, they are different. You have two different memory locations. Therefore, nothing will happen. Initially it's 0, although you call the function, it won't change anything for a here, right? So you should get 0 and 0. Now let's say if you want to say that this a is same as this a, okay, whatever the a value within the function, if you want to say that this is what we have in the outside, then you have to use this statement. So I'm going to copy paste this one, take another code window, Control V, and then I'm going to say add a new statement. This is called global. I will type another statement, say globally. So that the statement global means I'm going to say that, okay, this a is the same a in outside. So now what will happen when you run it? You will get 0 and 1. Okay, copy the code to another code cell and just add global a, run, and observe whether you are getting 0 and 1. The scope of variable, that means how visible our variables when we create functions. So what you need to note here, all the variables that we will create within the function, we normally say that it's local to the function. Whatever the variables you create within the function, it will be local to the function, which means you cannot use them outside. It is not actually visible. Right. So in this example, the variable a that you have defined within the function, it's local to the function. When I say local, it will not be visible to the outside, or it's not available. Right? So that's why you end up getting 0 and 0. Although you call the function, nothing will happen to the variable outside of the function. Right. So since we cannot use the variables we created within the function, we have to use global, the keyword global in Python, to access the variable outside the function. So when you want to access the value outside the function, make a note that we have to define as global. So in this example, now you can see the variable within the function change a, we define as a global a, which is to say that, okay, this a and what is outside a, they are the same. So whenever you make the change to this a, so it will be the same as the previous a. Right. Okay. Now that we have, discussed, about the functions. Now we can look some examples, right? So let's see whether we can work on some examples. So in this example, what we are going to do, Before we move on to the next one, let's do a simple example. First exercise. Okay. So get the name of a person. So the first question, get name of a person and greet him. So let's say our function is like greeting. If you say greeting, right? So you get the person's name, right? So for example, if you say greeting Sampa, this should output hello Sampa. Yes. Can you try this first and give me the code? Right. Remember now, when we talk about this defining functions, my question is actually creating a function called greeting. And whenever you provide some value to this, it should display this hello Samba. So the starting point is we have to say def. This is how we create a function. And the function name is greeting, isn't it? And then when you provide a value, let's say I'm going to get a name of a person. Simply we want to say hello, whatever the name. So we can simply say print. I can say hello, right? And then name. Right? Now see how it will work. So when you run it, nothing will happen. Yes. Now we can make use of it. Say greeting Sampath. If you have done it correctly, you should say hello Sampath. Let's say greeting Sampath. You should say hello Sampath. Right? So you can use. If you want to use, let's say, input function, you can use input function, no worries. You can get a name of a person and then you can change it. Okay, another question. Okay, first of all, if you finish up to this point, can you please raise your hands? So I have asked to create a function called area rectangle. The idea is you get the length and breadth of a rectangle. And when you want to get the area of a rectangle, you just simply multiply by length with the breadth, right? Yes. So we have to do something like this. Def, we are going to say area rectangle. This is called length and breadth. Simply we can say print length into breadth. So we can put it like this. So if you call it area rectangle, so let's say 10, 20 by 10. So when you run it, so 20 is assigned to length, 10 is into breadth. So you print length into breadth. So if this correctly executed, we should get 200, right? Simply we multiply length with breadth. Right. So we can see we are getting 200 here, right? Simply we multiply 20 and 10 together. Right. Now, I want to talk about another idea before we move on to the next one. Now, let's say I want to store this answer into another variable like this. Let's say I'm going to insert the answer, let's say ANS. ANS stand for answer. I will talk about area rectangle. Let's say this is 150, right? And then ideally, I'm expecting this to be stored in answer. And then I will say, right, print answer. So let me try to start from the beginning. Let me share my screen again. Right, now this is what we were discussing. So we created the area rectangle and we call the function. Now let's say I'm going to store this answer. And then I'm trying to print this answer, right? So you will notice that here we will not get the expected answer. Reason is, in area rectangle, right? So we have to run first this one. And then we will use this. And we'll get no answer here. So there's a spelling mistake here, rectangle. Let me run. So you see, I'm getting two outcomes, 5,000 and none. Okay, let me explain what happens. Now, the reason for this one is, although we call this function here, when you call the function, the 100 will forward it to length, 50 is forwarded to breadth, and simply it will print it. So that's why we get 5,000. Nothing will save under answer. So that's why when you say print answer, we are getting that. Okay, so the solution, we have to redefine this. So let me define this. Instead of print statement here, printing will stop here. It won't come the results back. So whenever you want to get the result back, instead of print, we should use return keyword. Remember, we talked about return keyword earlier with previous example, right? We discuss break and continue, and the next one is return. So we have to, instead of say print, we have to say return. So let me explain. So I am going to redefine this time. So I will get area rectangle, but instead of say print, I will say return. So what return keyword does, it will return the multiplication of both length and breadth, right? And it works like earlier, no issue. You can say area rectangle. And let's say we have 150. So if you do, visibly you don't see any difference. And you will get the correct answer. But now, when you want to use answer this way, it will work as well because of return keyword. So when you say 100, 50, and if you print answer, right? So this time, since we have used return keyword, right? Here we will get the same answer when you print answer. So that means it store the answer here. So what is the difference between the first two? First one, we stop with the print statement. So whenever you call the function, it goes there, but it will print. It never comes back. But when you use return keyword, what happens? This function will go to this, length becomes 100, breadth becomes 50, and you multiply these two together and it's 2 in here. So when you say answer equal area rectangle, Python is returned back to the answer and it is finally print. Right, make a note of this. This is called return keyword. Especially whenever you want to pass value to a main program, we should use return instead of print statement.